Welcome back everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about how you can give yourself a pay rise. Now that sounds counterintuitive given that normally you rely on someone else to have a pay rise, so I'll mainly be discussing that topic. In addition, there's two news articles that I'm going to be going over. The first one is from LG releasing a wearable air purifier, and also the concern that the UK will most likely face tax increases. But first, an update on the Trading 212 portfolio. So we can see that the account has reached £11,000. Specifically, what I want to look at today is my actual activity for the month. So on the history here, we can see all the different individual stocks that I brought into. Now you can see these are very low amounts. These are fractional, and this is just because I've been investing into the pie. And these are the different companies that have been invested. We've also got dividends in the mix as well. And of course, I've been depositing a little bit more heavily this month. I think it was close to £400 or £500. So we can see that I've had a total number of dividends of £128 and 6p, and these come in several times throughout the month. So yesterday, for instance, I received dividends from Wells Fargo and also Intel. And at the end of every month, if I'm not too lazy, I will update this spreadsheet which I have. And so taking a look at August, for instance, when I had just over £10,000, I received dividends of £33. Now that was an increase from the previous month of slightly over £8. And so we can start to see how I'm funding my account and how I'm receiving passive income. And it's this income which I'm able to provide myself with a pay rise. So taking a step back for a second, generally when you are trying to obtain a pay rise, it's really difficult given that you're having to wait for your manager to give you one. Now, given the times, many companies are struggling to stay afloat due to the pandemic. And so the possibility of a pay rise is simply out of the question, given that most individuals are trying their best just to keep their job and potentially accept a pay cut during the process. Now, a far better approach is to give yourself a pay rise, as it's something that you can actually control. For those that are currently in the workforce and are using your monthly income to increase your personal investing portfolio, then now is the time to continue to grow your portfolio so that you are financially stable without requiring a workplace pay rise. Now, in my case, these dividends continue to come in. I'll be updating September at the end of the month. Now, you can all look back to my very first video on this channel. It was slightly over a year ago, but at that time I funded my account with £30, and at the end of that month it was around the £40 mark, and I didn't receive any dividends. And we can see that throughout the months this has steadily increased, and for the most part it's been very stable. Now, of course, when I add more money, so the principal value, when that increases and I buy into dividend-based companies, then the numbers are going to increase, especially on a 3-month basis, given that most companies pay out every 3 months. But in my case, these dividends have been realized, meaning that I still have the underlying stocks which have either appreciated or depreciated, but I have the extra cash to reinvest. So these dividends that I log are reinvested back into the market, and that's known as DRIP, D-R-I-P. So when I go out and buy more shares of a given company, and these days the process is mostly automated, but when I look from month to month, I'm able to provide myself with a pay rise. We're seeing these numbers here, although they're small, they're increasing every time, and I haven't had to work any harder. I've just had to buy more shares of a given company. Now, of course, you need funds to actually grow your portfolio. You can't be investing into companies if you don't have any money to invest in the first place, and that's generally achieved from working an actual job. So if there's other YouTubers out there that are telling you to quit your day job, then definitely reconsider that advice. It's much safer to have a 9-to-5 job, and of course if you want to do any side hustles, then go for it. That's probably the perfect time to do so. So let's take a step back from my portfolio for a second, and let's just say I decide to invest £100 into a stock that has a dividend yield of 2%. Now, assuming the investment is sensible, then we've just increased our net worth by 2%. So with £100, that becomes £2. Now, assuming year on year those dividends are continually paid out, which is an okay assumption given that most of the time dividends will increase as time goes on. And yes, there's inflation as well that we have to consider. But assuming everything is equal, then I haven't had to work any harder. So another way to think about this is to treat your money, so the £100, and see that as an employee for yourself. So once you convert that money into shares, then from there on, the employee or the shares shares are now working for you while you sit back and decide whether to continue your investment with such a company. So this is the true form of passive income. Now, it should be said that money shouldn't be seen as a disposable asset. You want to have your money working for you and generating wealth. The problem is that the majority of people will receive a paycheck and then spend all the money, which results in you having to work continually, and your money is never utilized to generate more wealth. And so just to picture that for a second, we can see that when we receive our monthly income or any money that we have and free to spend, generally we'll follow just this red line here, and we'll spend that money on potentially living costs, items for ourselves such as clothing, or just other expenditures that we have on ourselves. Now, a much better strategy is to take that paycheck that you have and effectively split into two. So following the blue line, we get to define how much of a split we want, whether it's 50-50 or 60-40, but we can allocate one portion into our investment. That's what this mobile image represents. So money goes into our brokerage firm. Now we have these dotted lines here, which tell us that at some time in the future, should we wish to, we can take the gains from our portfolio and start spending on ourselves or within our monthly bills that we have. But as I mentioned earlier, with the drip process, you want to maximize and compound your earnings so that by the time it comes to retirement, then you actually have money that you can use for yourself. If you do this too early, then you're not going to have the gains that you otherwise would have. Now, of course, we still have bills to pay, and that's what this second set of money is about. So everyone is different, and for those that are investing are going to allocate a set amount and they're going to be aware of how much they need to spend on monthly bills. But this blue line workflow is a much better alternative. It's one that I have set up already, and I'm aware that a lot of my audiences have this type of workflow. But if you find yourself following this red line, then now is the time to act. It's never too late, and all it requires is for you to have an investment account of some sort and grow your portfolio from there. So on to some news now. We have the likes of LG that have released this wearable air purifier. Based on the image, this looks like a prototype. And actually my first thought was that this probably looks very uncomfortable. But for those unaware, LG is a South Korean based company. Chances are your TV is probably made of LG. But there is an upcoming press conference held in Berlin. It's a virtual show this year. But we have this item called Puricare. It's a wearable device that purifies the air. And the main goal here is to solve the issue where the likes of homemade masks or bad quality masks are not providing the quality that is required. So the device has two filters on the side. It's a similar filter that is used within home-based air purifier products, and we can see the device here. Now, of course, for the Western world, a lot of people think about masks and associate that with COVID, but for other countries out there, apart from COVID, people wear masks given the poor air quality. And so I guess LG is trying to position themselves not to be this individual item just for viruses, but to tackle the problem of poor air quality. Now, it's not to say that they pushed this product through due to the pandemic. I guess we should just hope that this mask is also a bacterial-based item that can protect from the likes of viruses. There needs to be more information on the actual filters themselves. For instance, if we have, say, a K95 mask, then is that better than having this somewhat of an expensive device? Now, LG has responded somewhat, and they are waiting for further testing to be complete before they share all the details. Whether or not this is COVID proof, we are yet to find out. Now, in terms of the design, I would like to know what it's actually made of, how heavy it is. This device, without a doubt, is going to be more heavier than one of the paper-based masks. And after time, even with the paper masks, they can pull against the ear. So I'm curious how long you should be wearing this type of device for. In terms of the battery, we have the capability of running 8 hours on what's referenced as a low mode or 2 hours on a high mode. Now, it's unclear what trade-offs you have when switching from low to high mode. Now, in terms of the low mode, we have a battery of 8 hours. For most individuals, this is going to be more than enough, but there are going to be other people that are out way longer than that. But given this is the first product of its type, 8 hours is a good baseline. Potentially future iterations will have longer lasting battery. There's definitely a concern that should the battery run out, then it's no longer going to be actively filtering. Does it mean you have to have a spare backup paper one? But hopefully 8 hours is more than enough for the average use case. Now we can actually see that the device has these UV LED lights. They're designed to kill bacteria, adding an extra level of protection beyond the filtration system. This additional technology is great to have within a device. Now there's other technology on this device, the ability to regulate the speed of the filtration based on how the individual breathes. I mean, it's pretty cool. But what we don't have is the price of this device. So that's the big unknown. So we have to keep an eye out for that price in the future. So do you think you'll be wearing a mask like the one here? Let me know in the comments below. Now there's been some economists which have provided us with a warning that the UK will most likely face substantial tax increases in the future years, and this is in response to paying for the debt that COVID-19 resulted in. So off the bat, it's quite interesting that, as always, it's the people that are working that potentially have to face a tax increase, which is as a result of the poor performance from the UK government. Now the article goes on to say that it won't be for a few years before these tax rises take place. Now we have Paul Johnson here, which I had no idea who he was before I read this post, but he's the director of the IFS, and it's stated that it's probably true that taxes would have to rise. We'll probably be looking at the likes of income tax, VAT, and national insurance, which are the most likely places that the tax will increase. Now for the most part, people are paying their national insurance. VAT is something that we are affected when buying items, and then income tax is probably the grey area where we're unsure whether there'll be a higher taxation for higher income earners. Will there be an increase in taxation for middle or low income earners? We are yet to see, and that's probably the biggest question that I have here. Now the government's job is to think about the economy and the growth. So all they know at the moment is that taxes need to increase somehow to reduce the deficit. And so it's a guessing game to some degree to find which areas and which individuals can be taxed the most, which does the least damage to the economy rather than damaging the growth aspects. There are other avenues to be considered as well. For instance, instead of just simply increasing taxes, there could be a tax on wealth. So let's say you have ownership in some form of land, then you may see higher taxes in those areas. It's very unclear at the moment as to what exactly will be taxed, other than the idea of increased taxation is most likely going to happen. Now, unfortunately, this is all due to the government borrowing money. Of course, the decision was made to furlough individuals and the government paid for that, but in the long run, it is the people of the country that will be paying that back. Now, it's not to say that the furlough scheme wasn't required, it was definitely necessary in my view, but the ideal situation would have not to have had a lockdown in the first place. If we look at the likes of, let's say, South Korea, there was no imposed lockdown during the first wave, and for the most part people were still able to work and travel, etc. So unfortunately the government has done this to themselves. That is irrespective of who would have been in power. But we can see the national debt is at £2 trillion, and already it's over 100% of the GDP. So we have the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, and he stated that we must return our public finances to a sustainable footing over time, which will require taking difficult decisions. Sunak has also ordered a review into the capital gains tax. So that's something that can affect all of us as investors out there. Right now we have capital gains of slightly over £12,000. Now we have the likes of Boris Johnson stating that tax increases won't actually happen for at least another 18 months. So we'll check into this in another 18 months and see what happens. So let me know what you think. Are you happy with having increased taxes in the future? Do you think it's necessary? Let me know in the comments below. So if you are new around here, do consider subscribing. I upload every week. Let me know if there's anything that you want me to talk about in future videos. I do have a list that I'll be going through, but I'm interested in hearing your opinions nonetheless. So with that said, thanks for watching everyone, and I'll catch you in the next one.